A young woman is sold by her own father to care for a very wealthy man in a coma. In the mansion where he is hospitalized, she discovers she wasn't hired, but imprisoned. When she realizes the millionaire is conscious and trapped in his own body, she risks everything to save him. But when he finally wakes up, the truth they reveal together is so shocking it threatens to destroy everything around them. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Emily never knew the meaning of home. In the small town of Oak Ridge, rural Pennsylvania, she grew up in the shadows of a father who saw her as a burden, not a daughter. Stanley. Miller drank to forget his own frustrations, but alcohol only fueled his bitterness. The wooden house on the outskirts of town held memories Emily tried to forget, shouts, accusations, and that phrase he repeated in his worst moments, "You cost me everything, including your mother." Emily's mother, Margaret, had disappeared when she was only 5 years old. The memories were sparse. A soft lavender perfume, lullabies, and the promise that one day she would return. Emily clung to these memories in difficult moments, especially when her father came stumbling through the front door. At 19, Emily worked 3 jobs: mornings at Mr. Tony's bakery, afternoons as a house cleaner for local families, and weekends as a waitress at the only restaurant in town. Every penny was saved with a dream, to gather enough to escape to Philadelphia and perhaps find her mother. On that rainy Tuesday, returning home, she found her father talking with an elegant woman who completely clashed with the environment. Perfectly arranged hair, impeccable suit, and an expensive perfume that invaded the small room. She introduced herself as Dr. Heather Montgomery, attorney representing the Blackwood family. "Emily, you've been selected for a unique opportunity," said the woman with a calculated smile. "The Blackwood family is looking for someone with your profile for a special job at their residence in the Blue Ridge Mountains." Her father, with eyes fixed on the envelope Heather held, interrupted. "Everything's already arranged. You're leaving tomorrow." "But Dad, my job's my things." Emily tried to argue. "It's a unique opportunity," repeated Heather. "Salary 5 times more than you earn here, accommodation, food, all included." Emily noticed her father avoiding her gaze. Something was wrong, very wrong. "I can't just—" "You can and you will," Stanley cut her off. "Sign the papers." The contract had several pages, fine print, confusing terms. Emily tried to read, but Heather quickly turned the pages, indicating only the places for signatures. Confidentiality clauses, exclusivity terms, restrictions on external communication. "What exactly will I be doing there?" Emily asked hesitantly. "You'll be caring for a special person," Heather responded vaguely. When the lawyer left, Emily confronted her father. "What did you do?" Stanley put the envelope in the pocket of his worn shirt. "What I should have done a long time ago. Get rid of the burden." That night, rummaging through her father's drawers while he slept, Emily found the truth in the envelope: a contract for temporary transfer of guardianship and a receipt of payment. Her father had sold her. The next morning arrived mercilessly. A black car parked in front of the house. Heather was waiting in the back seat. Emily entered with just a backpack containing her few clothes and the only photo she had of her mother. The streets of Oak Ridge quickly disappeared through the rear window. After hours of travel, they arrived at an isolated property high in the mountains. Imposing gates opened, revealing a mansion that seemed from another world. Stone, glass, and wood formed an impressive structure amid lush nature. "Welcome to Windcrest Manor," said Heather. "Your new home." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Something in the way the staff looked at her, how the cameras seemed to follow her movements, how doors closed behind her. Everything indicated that this wasn't a job she was starting. It was a prison announcing itself. "When will I meet the person I'll be caring for?" she asked. "Right now," replied Heather, leading her down a wide corridor to a double, dark wooden door. "This is Nathan Blackwood. He's been in a coma for 2 years. Your function is simple. Talk to him, read to him, sing if you know how, stimulate his senses, bring him back." In the bed, a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, lay motionless. Black hair framed a face with striking features. Despite the time in inactivity, his body maintained an impressive dignity. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. Something about this man awakened a strange sense of familiarity in her. Why me? Why not hire professional nurses? Heather adjusted her blazer. Nathan responds better to young female voices. It's a specific therapeutic technique. After a pause, she added in a cold voice, "And remember, your function is to stimulate, not question. Everything that happens inside this house stays in this house." When the door closed, Emily was left alone with Nathan and the growing certainty that there was much more to this situation than appeared. She looked at the sleeping man and whispered, more to herself than to him, "What really happened to you?" Outside, the wind howled through the pine trees as if trying to tell secrets that the mansion walls kept. Emily knew that her own survival would depend on discovering the truth, and perhaps in the process, helping this stranger awaken from his forced sleep. The third day at Windcrest Manor dawned with an already established routine. Emily woke at 6, had breakfast alone at the small table in her room, never in the staff cafeteria, and at 7 o'clock, sharp entered Nathan's room. 12 hours daily, with timed breaks for her meals and basic needs. Heather made a point of reminding her that every minute was recorded by the cameras. Emily tried to create a bond with Nathan, even without response. She read news from old newspapers she found in the mansion's library, told stories from her childhood, and sometimes, when loneliness tightened, simply held his hand in silence. That afternoon, while organizing the cabinet with medical supplies, according to instructions from the head nurse, Sophia, a woman with a hard expression who rarely spoke more than necessary, Emily noticed an irregularity in the wall, a small crack, almost imperceptible, that formed the outline of a compartment. She looked at the camera in the corner of the room, made sure she was in the blind spot she had discovered, and carefully pressed the area. A soft click revealed a small built-in safe. Inside, a dark green leather journal with the initials NB engraved in gold. Nathan's journal. Emily hid it under her apron and continued her tasks. Only at night, when the lights went out and surveillance decreased, did she dare to open it. The first pages contained notes about Blackwood family business, real estate projects, acquisitions, numbers indicating fortunes. But at a certain point, the tone changed drastically. "I need to document this. Something is wrong. Heather and Caroline are plotting. I overheard conversations about asset transfer and declaration of incapacity. When I confronted them, Caroline looked at me in a way, like I was an obstacle. That same night, my coffee had a bitter taste. I woke up disoriented. Dr. Matthews said it was a low blood pressure episode. I don't believe it. I'm going to send a sample of my blood for independent analysis. If something happens to me, this journal is my proof." The last entry, dated 2 years ago, was even more disturbing. "I'm being systematically drugged." The test confirmed it. "I confronted Heather today, thinking she would protect me from Caroline. Terrible mistake. The two are in this together. Heather is the mind, Caroline the executor. I heard something about the same procedure as the other. One. Who was the other? What did they do to her? I need to pretend I don't know anything while seeking help. I tried to contact Mark, but my cell phone was confiscated. Tomorrow I'll try to use the office phone when everyone is at lunch. If something happens to me, whoever finds this journal, look for Mark Anderson, my lawyer. He'll know what to do." Emily's heart raced. It wasn't an accident. Nathan was being kept in an induced coma, part of an elaborate plan by Heather and someone named Caroline. But why? And who was the other one? The next morning, Emily entered Nathan's room with different eyes. He wasn't just a patient. He was a victim, just like her. During the morning reading, she leaned in and whispered in his ear, "I know what they did to you. I found your journal. I'll help you." For a moment, Emily thought she saw a variation in the heart rate on the monitor, but they quickly returned to a constant rhythm. She continued her reading normally, but now spoke in code, inserting messages between lines, assuring him that he wasn't alone. That same afternoon, while everyone was busy with the monthly visit of Dr. Matthews, the doctor responsible for the case, Emily took the opportunity to explore. In the west corridor, she found a locked door. The access card she used for Nathan's room didn't work there. As she was about to give up, she heard footsteps. She quickly hid behind a large statue. Caroline Blackwood. Emily recognized her from the photos in the corridors. An elegant woman of approximately 40 entered a code and went in. Before the door closed completely, Emily glimpsed shelves with organized folders. An archive. That night she gathered courage to sing to Nathan. Not just any song, but the melody her mother used to sing her to sleep. An old, almost forgotten song about birds finding their way back, no matter how far they had flown. And then it happened. A solitary tear ran down Nathan's face. Emily froze. It wasn't possible. People in comas don't cry in response to external stimuli. She looked at the camera, fearing someone had noticed. Quickly, she wiped the tear with a tissue and continued singing, now with a trembling voice full of emotion. When she finished, she leaned in again. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Seconds passed. Nothing. Emily sighed, thinking she had imagined the tear. She stood up to leave when she felt it, a light, almost imperceptible movement. Nathan's fingers had closed slightly over hers. "My God," she whispered, her heart nearly jumping out of her mouth. In the following days, Emily developed a communication system. One squeeze meant yes, two squeezes no. With patience, she confirmed her suspicions. Nathan was conscious, trapped in his own body, victim of continuous sedation. One night, while checking his vital signs, Emily heard voices in the corridor. Heather and Caroline were talking in low tones. "The documentation will be ready in 2 weeks," Heather was saying. "After the declaration of brain death, the transfer of assets will be automatic." "And the girl?" asked Caroline. "Same solution as the others. The clinic at the border is prepared to receive her. A higher dose tonight, erratic behavior in the morning, diagnosis of psychotic break in the afternoon. It always works." Emily felt her blood freeze. She wasn't the first. How many others had passed through here, caring for Nathan, discovering the truth and then finalized? When the voices moved away, Emily squeezed Nathan's hand urgently. "They plan to declare you brain dead in 2 weeks, and they want to give me the same end they gave the others. We need to act now." That night, Emily returned to the archive. Using a hairpin, she managed to force the simple lock on the ventilation window and enter through there. What she found horrified her. Folders with women's names, all hired as caregivers, all with the same fate, psychiatric internment or disappearance. And more disturbing, one of them had the surname Miller, the same as Emily. With trembling hands, she opened the folder. The photo of a woman in her 30s stared at her, the same eyes Emily saw in the mirror every morning. Underneath, a name that made her world collapse: Margaret Miller. Her mother hadn't abandoned the family. She too had been a caregiver at Windcrest Manor 15 years ago, and her disappearance hadn't been accidental, it had been planned. Emily returned to Nathan's room with her mind in turmoil. When she held his hand, she felt a different squeeze, stronger. She leaned in to check his eyes and almost screamed in surprise. Nathan Blackwood was staring at her with wide open eyes. "Can you talk?" she whispered. He shook his head slightly in negative, but his eyes communicated 1,000 words. Fear, relief, gratitude, and above all, a desperate plea for help. "I'm going to get you out of here," promised Emily, feeling for the first time in years that she had a purpose greater than survival. "And I'm going to find out what happened to my mother. We won't be 2 more victims of theirs." That night, while the mansion slept, an invisible connection formed between 2 prisoners who now shared more than a room. They shared a secret and a mission. The conspiracy that had destroyed their lives would be exposed, no matter the cost. Emily knew that every minute was precious. In 2 weeks, both she and Nathan would be lost. But now they had something Heather and Caroline didn't expect: the truth beginning to emerge and, more importantly, each other. The next morning, Emily initiated her plan. First, she needed to better understand Nathan's condition. Taking advantage of the bathing moment, when Nurse Sophia briefly left the room to get clean towels, Emily urgently whispered, "Nathan, I need to know how much you can move. It's important for planning our escape." Nathan moved his fingers slightly, then his wrist, but when he tried to raise his arm, the effort was visible on his face. Months of immobility and medication had compromised his muscles. Emily understood that he couldn't walk on his own, which complicated everything. "Listen, I'll start gradually reducing your medication. We can't stop all at once, it would be dangerous and they would notice, but I'll replace part of the content of the vials with saline solution." Emily had observed the procedure for changing medication bags several times. The head nurse prepared the cocktails of sedatives and muscle relaxants in the medication room and brought them to connect to Nathan's access. If Emily could intercept this process, she might be able to alter the doses without anyone noticing. Her first attempt came that same afternoon. Pretending interest in learning more about medical care, she asked Sophia to observe the preparation of medications. "That's not part of your duties," the nurse responded dryly. "I just want to understand the process better in case an emergency occurs, and I'm alone with him," insisted Emily, trying to sound genuinely interested. Sophia hesitated, then partially gave in. "You can observe, but from a distance, and don't touch anything." In the medication room, Emily memorized every detail: the vials, the dosages, the preparation sequence. When Sophia was distracted answering a call, Emily quickly photographed the medication labels with her basic cell phone, the only personal item Heather had allowed her to keep, probably because it was an old model without internet access. Back in Nathan's room, Emily showed the photos of the medications, hiding the cell phone from the cameras. "Do you know these medicines? Do you know which are safe to reduce first?" Nathan blinked 3 times, the code they had established for yes. He had studied medicine for 2 years before taking over the family business after his father's death. That knowledge would now be crucial. Through the communication system they developed, blinks and light hand squeezes, Nathan indicated which medication should be reduced first: midazolam, a potent sedative that kept him in a semi-conscious state. The plan was risky. Emily needed to find moments to tamper with the medication bags without being detected by the cameras. The opportunity arose the following night, during a storm that caused a brief power outage. The mansion's generators came into operation almost immediately, but the cameras restarted with an interval of approximately 40 seconds, enough time for Emily to act. With a syringe she had previously hidden, she withdrew 20% of the content from the midazolam bag and replaced it with saline solution. The change was small enough not to raise suspicions, but significant enough to begin gradually awakening Nathan. During the night, while everyone slept, Emily returned to the archive. This time, she focused on her mother's folder, Margaret. The documents revealed a disturbing story. Hired as a nurse to care for Nathan's father, she apparently discovered something compromising about the administration of the Blackwood fortune. The final report, signed by Dr. Matthews, the same doctor who cared for Nathan, diagnosed severe psychological instability and recommended internment in a psychiatric clinic on the border with West Virginia. The last notes indicated patient transferred, but with no record of final destination. Emily felt tears streaming down. Her mother hadn't left the family voluntarily. She had been silenced, just as they were trying to do with Nathan. Another crucial discovery was in a folder marked Patrimonial Transition, documents prepared by Heather detailing how Nathan's assets would be transferred to a holding controlled by Caroline after the declaration of his brain death. The plan was perfect: keep him technically alive for years, controlling his fortune through powers of attorney, and eventually declare his death when they had transferred everything to shell companies abroad. In her room, Emily organized the information collected. She needed external help. She remembered the name mentioned in Nathan's journal, Mark Anderson, the lawyer, but how to contact him without access to the internet or phone. The answer came unexpectedly 2 days later. Dr. Matthews arrived for the bi-weekly visit, accompanied by a young assistant Emily had never seen before. While the doctor examined Nathan, the assistant prepared the equipment for routine exams. Emily noticed something different about him: an attentive look that contrasted with the indifference of the other staff. When Dr. Matthews briefly left to answer a call, the assistant approached Emily. "You're the new caregiver," he said in a low voice. "My name is Liam. I've been working with Dr. Matthews for 3 months, but I've been observing what happens here. Not everyone is complicit." Emily hesitated, fearing a trap. "What do you mean?" "I know about the others before you. And I know Nathan isn't in a coma by accident." Before they could continue, they heard the doctor's footsteps returning. Liam quickly went back to work, but not without accidentally dropping a small memory card in the pocket of Emily's apron. That night, using the adapter that came with her old cell phone, Emily managed to access the content of the card. She found photos of documents, recorded conversations between Heather and Dr. Matthews, and a text file with a message. "If you're reading this, it means you've decided to trust me. I'm not who I appear to be. Mark Anderson sent me to investigate. What happened to Nathan? I've been infiltrated for months. We have little time. In 2 days, the driver who brings medical supplies is our ally. He can take a message to the outside. Prepare everything you can gather as evidence." Emily could barely sleep. She finally had an ally, a connection to the outside world. But how to ensure Liam was trustworthy? What if it was another trap by Heather? The next morning, she noticed the first significant change in Nathan. His eyes were more alert, and he could slightly move his head. The plan of gradual medication reduction was working. When they were alone, he whispered with difficulty, his first words in 2 years, "Liam, real, trust." That was all Emily needed to hear. That night, she wrote a detailed letter, attached copies of the most important documents she had photographed, and prepared the package to give to the driver. She included the exact location of Nathan's journal in the room and instructions on how to access the secret archive. The delivery day arrived. Emily watched from her room window the supply truck parking in the back courtyard. Liam had instructed that she should put the package inside an empty box of medical gloves and leave it in the storage room during her lunch break. With her heart racing, Emily executed her part. She left the box in the designated place and quickly returned to Nathan's room. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a spark of hope. Help was on the way. What Emily didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Heather was observing the security camera recordings in her office. Something in Emily's posture had changed in recent days. The frightened young woman who had arrived at the mansion now moved with purpose, observed too much, asked questions between the lines. Heather picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Dr. Matthews, I think we have a problem with the new girl. Yes, like the others. Move the procedure up to tomorrow. We can't wait any longer." Emily, unaware of the approaching storm, held Nathan's hand and promised, "Soon we'll be free. Both of us." Dawn brought a strange feeling to Windcrest Manor. Emily immediately noticed the change in routine when Sophia didn't appear at the usual time for Nathan's medication change. In her place came a nurse she had never seen before, a woman with an expressionless face who introduced herself curtly as Veronica. "Sophia is indisposed," she explained, without making eye contact, while checking Nathan's vital signs with mechanical movements. "I'll be responsible for medical care for a few days." Emily tried to maintain her composure, but her heart raced. The sudden change in personnel, right after sending her message to Mark Anderson, couldn't be a coincidence. "Has there been any change in his condition?" asked Emily, trying to probe the situation. "Nothing significant," replied Veronica, but her eyes quickly wandered to the medication bag that Emily had tampered with the night before. "Dr. Matthews will come this afternoon for a complete evaluation. He asked that you be present." The tone with which Veronica emphasized the last phrase made Emily shudder. When the nurse left, Emily leaned over Nathan. "Something's wrong. I think they've discovered what we're doing." Nathan, now capable of small facial movements, showed concern. With great effort, he whispered, "Careful, Heather. Always one step ahead." During the morning, Emily noticed other disturbing signs. The number of security guards in the corridors had increased. Her access card, which allowed limited movement around the mansion, now opened only Nathan's room and her own dormitory. And more disturbing, the archive where she had found information about her mother was locked with a new electronic system. Near noon, while helping Nathan with light exercises for his arms, part of his secret recovery, Heather entered the room without warning. Her cold gaze swept the room, pausing momentarily on Emily's hands holding Nathan's arm. "Emily, I need you in my office now," ordered Heather, her tone allowing no refusal. On the way, Emily tried to control her growing panic. Had Heather discovered about Liam, about the driver, about the medication reduction? In the opulent office overlooking the property's gardens, Heather indicated a chair in front of her desk. "Are you enjoying your work here, Emily?" she asked, her voice artificially smooth. "Yes, ma'am. Nathan is responding well to the stimuli." Heather smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Interesting that you mentioned that. Dr. Matthews noticed some anomalies in Nathan's recent tests, fluctuations in sedation levels that don't correspond to the prescribed dosages." Emily felt her mouth go dry. Perhaps he's developing a tolerance to the medications. Perhaps, Heather leafed through a folder in front of her. Or perhaps someone is interfering with the treatment. "Do you know what happened to the last person who tried this?" With a calculated movement, Heather pushed a photograph toward Emily. It was a young woman, approximately her age, in a hospital bed, empty gaze, restrained by medical straps. Amanda Rivera, the previous caregiver. She developed an obsession with Nathan, convinced herself he was improving, that he was responding to her. She started altering medications, believing she was saving him. When confronted, she had a psychotic breakdown. She's been institutionalized at Horizon Clinic since then. Emily struggled to maintain a neutral expression, despite the terror consuming her. Horizon Clinic, the same place mentioned in the documents about her mother's fate. "It's a shame when this happens," continued Heather. "Vulnerable young women, isolated, developing fantasies. They start imagining conspiracies, impossible romances. And when reality doesn't match these fantasies..." Heather made a gesture indicating madness. At that moment, the door opened, and Dr. Matthews entered, accompanied not by Liam but by two men in white coats whom Emily had never seen. "These are Doctors Robert and Gregory from Horizon Clinic," Heather introduced. "They've come to evaluate your psychological state, Emily. It's a standard procedure for all mansion employees." Emily felt her blood freeze. It was a trap. The men weren't ordinary doctors. They were part of the scheme to silence her, just as they did with Amanda, with her mother, with all the others. "I'm perfectly fine," replied Emily, trying not to show panic. "There's no need for evaluation." Dr. Matthews approached, his voice falsely compassionate. "Emily, we've noticed changes in your behavior. Isolation, talking to yourself in Nathan's room, altered sleep patterns. These are concerning signs." "I'm just dedicated to my work," argued Emily, frantically searching for a way out. "Where was Liam? Had he been discovered too?" "Naturally," smiled Dr. Robert, "but a small checkup won't hurt. Just a few tests, perhaps a brief hospitalization for observation." "I don't consent to hospitalization," declared Emily firmly, standing up. "And now, if you'll excuse me, Nathan needs his morning exercises." Heather made an almost imperceptible signal. The two men positioned themselves between Emily and the door. "I'm afraid it's not a choice, dear," said Heather softly. "Your contract provides for acceptance of all medical procedures determined by management. Section 12, paragraph 3, if I'm not mistaken." Dr. Matthews approached with a syringe. "This will just calm you down, for your own good." Panic took hold of Emily. In a desperate move, she pushed the chair against the doctor's legs and ran for the door. But the two men from the clinic grabbed her with surprising strength. "Always the same reactions," sighed Heather, as if watching a repeated film. "First denial, then aggression. Emily, you're just confirming our diagnosis." The needle penetrated Emily's arm. A strange warmth spread through her veins, followed by increasing dizziness. Her legs gave way, but before she completely lost consciousness, she saw the door open again. Liam entered, now wearing a complete doctor's coat. His eyes met Emily's for a moment, but there was no recognition in them, only the same professional indifference as the others. "Dr. Heather, the supply driver is waiting for your signature to release the new medications," he said, completely ignoring the scene unfolding. It was the final blow. Her only ally was also part of the conspiracy, or worse, had never been a true ally. When Emily woke up, she was in a strange room, white walls, a barred window, and a simple bed fastened to the floor. She tried to get up, but discovered her wrists were bound by padded restraints. In the distance, she heard voices in the corridor. Another one for the restricted wing. Same protocol as the previous ones. For how long? Indefinite, until the asset transfer is completed. Emily closed her eyes, tears silently streaming down. Nathan was alone again, probably with increased doses of sedatives, all the evidence she had gathered lost, and she was exactly where Heather had planned from the beginning, silenced, discredited, labeled as mentally unstable. In the following hours, a series of doctors visited her. They asked leading questions, noted each response, each reaction. Emily realized the pattern. The more she insisted on the truth about Nathan and the conspiracy, the more delusional she would appear. Eventually, a nurse entered to administer more medication. Emily recognized the uniform. It was from Horizon Clinic, the same place mentioned in the documents about her mother. "Please," begged Emily, "I need to know if a patient named Margaret Miller was here." The nurse paused briefly, her eyes revealing a flash of recognition before closing again into the professional mask. "Rest now," was all she said, injecting the sedative. As consciousness slipped away again, Emily clung to one last thought. Her mother had been here. Maybe she still was. If she could escape the restraints, maybe she could find her. But how to escape? How to prove the truth when the entire system was designed to silence her? Without Liam, without the evidence, without access to Nathan, what hope was there? The darkness of sedation took over, but before completely succumbing, Emily heard a whisper close to her ear. "Don't give up. You're not alone." Was it just her desperate imagination? Or was there someone at the clinic who wasn't part of the conspiracy? Emily couldn't stay conscious to find out. The drug took her into a deep sleep, where the faces of Nathan, her mother, and all the other victims mixed in an endless nightmare. The days at Horizon Clinic merged into a haze of medications and interrogations. Emily had lost track of time. It could have been 3 days or 3 weeks. The routine was always the same. Wake up confused, be questioned by different doctors about her hallucinations regarding Nathan Blackwood, receive more sedatives, sleep. In her moments of lucidity, she tried to mentally map the place, observe the staff, look for gaps in security. But it was difficult to maintain clarity when her body and mind were constantly numbed. On a particularly foggy morning, Emily noticed a change in the routine. A different nurse entered her room, an older woman with grey hair and kind eyes that contrasted with the coldness of the other staff. "Good morning, Emily," she said, checking vital signs with precise but gentle movements. "I'm Constance, morning shift nurse starting today." There was something familiar about her voice, in the way she pronounced words. Emily tried to focus through the medication fog. "How long have I been here?" asked Emily, her voice hoarse from disuse. 16 days, replied Constance in a low voice, approaching to adjust the pillow. While leaning in, she whispered, "Don't react. Mark sent me. Liam is fine. Trust me." Emily contained the urge to widen her eyes or show any reaction. Mark Anderson, the lawyer mentioned in Nathan's journal. Liam wasn't a traitor. Hope, long dormant, began to pulse again. In the following days, Constance became a constant presence. Almost imperceptibly, she began reducing the doses of sedatives administered to Emily, partially replacing them with saline solution, exactly as Emily had done with Nathan's medications. Gradually, Emily's mind cleared, allowing her to absorb the information that Constance discreetly shared during daily care. Liam managed to send the evidence you gathered, she informed in a whisper, while adjusting the sheets. Mark is building the case. Nathan is stable but returned to a state of complete sedation after your departure. And my mother, Emily asked in one of the rare moments when they were alone. Margaret Miller, was she here? Constance's face assumed a grave expression. She was. For a long time. She was transferred 3 years ago to the long-term treatment wing. Few have access. Is she still alive? The question that had tormented Emily since discovering the truth finally found voice. Constance hesitated, looking at the door to ensure no one was observing them. Yes, but she's not the same person you knew. Years of forced medication permanently affect the mind. A tear ran down Emily's face. Her mother was alive, but a prisoner, just like her. Determination grew in her chest. She wouldn't save. Only herself and Nathan, but also her mother. On the third night after Constance's arrival, the plan began to take shape. During the shift change, when surveillance naturally decreased, the nurse slipped a small metal object under Emily's pillow. Universal key for the restraints, she explained quickly. And this. She placed a thin cell phone inside the pillowcase. It has only one number programmed, Mark's. The bathroom window has a blind spot in the cameras. Tomorrow night, at 11:45 p.m., the electronic security will be deactivated for 2 minutes for system maintenance. It's our only chance. That same night, when the corridor was silent, Emily used the key to temporarily release her restraints and access the cell phone. The deep voice that answered immediately conveyed confidence. Emily, this is Mark Anderson. We're working to get you out of there tomorrow, but I need you to understand the risks. If we fail, the consequences will be severe. I understand the risks, replied Emily with determination, but I can't abandon my mother. She's in the long-term treatment wing. There was a moment of silence. That complicates things. That wing has reinforced security. We would need to create a bigger distraction. Do whatever is necessary, insisted Emily. I'm not leaving without her. The call was brief but enough to renew Emily's hope. Back in restraints, pretending to be sedated, her mind worked frantically, planning every detail. The next morning, during her bath, Constance brought more information. The long-term treatment wing is in the basement. I got an access card, but it only works for 10 minutes after being activated. You'll have to be quick. How will I find her among so many patients? Room 115. I memorized the location when I saw her name in the system. She's isolated from other patients. The day passed with agonizing slowness. At night, as planned, Dr. Matthews appeared for a routine evaluation. Emily played her part perfectly, answered questions with deliberate confusion, pretended to believe Nathan was a hallucination, demonstrated acceptance of her supposed unstable mental state. You're progressing well, commented the doctor, making notes. We'll continue gradually reducing your antipsychotics if you maintain this lucidity. When he left, Emily almost laughed at the irony. Her supposed improvement was exactly the opposite. She was more lucid because Constance had secretly reduced the medications, not because she was accepting the false narrative they were trying to impose. As night advanced, Emily felt each heartbeat like a drum. 11:30 p.m. Constance entered for the last night check, discreetly placing a folded set of nurse's clothes under the blanket. I'll be at the end of the main corridor, she whispered. When the lights flicker, that's the signal. 2 minutes, Emily. Not a second more. Roughly 3 p.m. Emily already had the restraints open, dressed as a nurse, waiting. Her heart seemed to want to jump out of her mouth. 45 p.m. The lights flickered briefly. That was the signal. With quick movements, Emily left her room. The corridor was empty, as Constance had predicted. At the end of it, the nurse was waiting. Kai with a clipboard, pretending to review medical records. Access card, murmured Constance, passing the clipboard to Emily. The card was hidden between the sheets. Service elevator at the end of the corridor on the left, basement. You have 10 minutes after activating the card. Emily nodded, briefly squeezing the nurse's hand. Thank you for everything. Go, Mark will be waiting at the emergency exit in the back at 12:15 a.m. exactly. Don't be late. The service elevator was old and noisy. The seconds it took to reach the basement seemed like an eternity. When the doors opened, Emily faced a narrow corridor, illuminated by fluorescent lights that flickered irregularly. Numbered. Signs identified the rooms. Rooms 107, 109. The silence was oppressive, interrupted only by the hum of ventilation. Emily reached room 115. She took a deep breath, passed the card in the reader. The green light lit up. Inside, a small ceiling lamp weakly illuminated the room. A grey-haired woman was sitting on the bed, staring fixedly at the wall. Even after 15 years, even with features altered by time and medications, Emily recognized her mother. "Mom," she called softly, approaching. "Margaret, it's me, Emily." Margaret's eyes, previously empty, slowly focused on her daughter's face. A flash of recognition emerged, like a weak flame fighting against the wind. "Emily?" The voice was hoarse, hesitant. "My little Emily." "Yes, Mum. I've come to get you out of here." Margaret touched her daughter's face with trembling fingers. "They told me you were dead, that your father, I'm alive and we're leaving together." Helping Margaret to stand was more difficult than Emily had anticipated. Years of immobility had weakened her legs. Supporting her mother, Emily headed to the door, checking the clock. 7 minutes since the card activation. In the corridor, they heard voices approaching. Emily quickly led her mother to a small supply closet, silently closing the door behind them. Through the crack, she saw 2 security guards passing, talking casually. New directive from Dr. Heather. Checks every 30 minutes on priority patients. Which ones are the priorities again? Miller in 115 and Rivera in 120, the ones related to the Blackwood case. Emily felt a chill. Amanda Rivera, the previous caregiver, was also there, but there was no time to save her too. Not now. When the guards moved away, Emily and Margaret continued. The elevator seemed further away on the return. Finally, they reached it. The doors closed seconds before another guard turned the corner. On the ground floor, Emily led her mother through the corridors following Constance's instructions. The emergency exit was in sight when an alarm began to sound. "Attention, possible patient escape. Lockdown of all exits in progress." Emily quickened her pace, practically carrying her mother. They reached the emergency door. It was locked. "No. No, no," muttered Emily desperately, pushing the pressure bar repeatedly. Suddenly, the door opened from the outside. Liam was there, dressed as a clinic security guard. "Quick," he ordered, helping to hold Margaret. "We managed to hack the security system, but it won't last long." They ran to a car that was waiting with the engine running. Mark Anderson was at the wheel, a middle-aged man with a determined expression. They had barely entered the vehicle when the clinic sirens began to sound. "We got the necessary evidence," explained Mark as he quickly drove away from the clinic. Documents about Heather and Caroline's scheme, falsified patient records, suspicious financial transfers. But most importantly, he paused, looking at Emily through the rearview mirror, was what Liam discovered last week. Liam turned from the front seat. "Nathan never had an accident. The tests I secretly conducted show traces of chronic poisoning. Heather and Caroline were slowly killing him, but in a way that would look like a natural degenerative disease." Emily felt her blood freeze. "Then why keep him alive in a coma?" "Because Nathan's father's will had a special clause," explained Mark. "If Nathan died before turning 30, 70% of the fortune would go to charitable institutions. They needed to keep him technically alive until he reached that age, while gradually transferring assets to shell companies abroad." "And my mother?" asked Emily, holding Margaret's hand, who seemed confused by everything happening. "She discovered part of the scheme 15 years ago when she worked as a nurse for Nathan's father," replied Mark. "She was silenced the same way they tried to do with you." A terrible revelation began to form in Emily's mind. "And my father, did he know?" Mark and Liam exchanged tense looks. "Your father not only knew," said Mark finally, "he was part of the scheme from the beginning. It was he who identified your mother as a threat to Heather. And 15 years later, he sold me to the same fate, completed Emily, her heart tight with the betrayal. Knowing exactly what would happen to me, the car continued down the dark road, moving away from the clinic toward an unknown destination. In the back seat, Margaret had fallen asleep on her daughter's shoulder, exhausted by the sudden escape. "Where are we going?" asked Emily. "To a safe place," replied Mark. "A temporary refuge while we prepare the next step." "And what is the next step?" Liam turned again, his determined eyes meeting Emily's. "Rescuing Nathan." The refuge was a simple house on the outskirts of Charlottesville, belonging to a former client of Mark's. Isolated enough not to attract attention, close enough to the city to have access to supplies. In the 3 days following the escape, Emily divided her time between caring for her mother and helping plan Nathan's rescue. Margaret alternated between moments of lucidity and confusion. Years of forced medications had left invisible scars on her mind. In her moments of clarity, she told Emily fragments of the past, how she discovered incriminating documents while caring for Nathan's father, how Heather silenced her, how she desperately tried to send messages home. At other times, she called Emily by her own mother's name or simply looked out the window, lost in a world only she could see. On the night of the 4th day, the group gathered to finalize the rescue plan. Mark spread maps and blueprints of Windcrest Manor across the living room table. "The scheme is risky," he explained. "Heather has doubled security since Emily's escape. She hired armed guards, installed new alarm systems. She's prepared for an invasion." "So how will we get in?" asked Emily. "We won't," replied Liam, pointing to the documents. "We'll make them bring Nathan to us." The plan was audacious. Using Mark's contacts in the judiciary, they secured an emergency court order for temporary transfer of Nathan to a public hospital for independent evaluation, based on evidence collected by Emily and Liam. A sympathetic judge, convinced by preliminary evidence of medical negligence, had signed the order under seal. "Tomorrow morning, court officers accompanied by an ambulance will show up at Windcrest Manor," explained Mark. "Heather will have no choice but to temporarily hand over Nathan or face detention for contempt." "What if she tries something?" asked Emily. "That's why you'll be in the ambulance," replied Liam, disguised as a paramedic. "You know the medications he receives. You'll be able to identify any suspicious changes." Emily nodded, trying to ignore the fear growing in her chest. Returning near Windcrest Manor, facing again the people who almost destroyed her life. The idea was terrifying, but for Nathan, for her mother, for all of Heather and Caroline's victims, she needed to be strong. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Sitting on the porch, watching the stars, she heard soft footsteps approaching. "Can't sleep either?" It was her mother, more lucid than she had been in days. "I'm afraid," confessed Emily. "What if something goes wrong tomorrow? What if Heather has already been alerted? What if—" Margaret sat beside her daughter, taking her hands in hers. "Fear is natural, sweetheart. I felt the same when I realized what was happening in that house, years ago." "How did you endure so long there? And later, at the clinic?" Margaret's eyes became distant. "At first it was the hope of returning to you. Later, well, the medications make you lose track of time, of reality. But part of me never gave up. That part always knew that one day you would find me." Embraced under the starry sky, mother and daughter shared silent tears, of pain for lost time, of joy for their reunion, of fear for the uncertain future. Morning arrived relentlessly. Emily put on the paramedic uniform that Liam had secured. Our car would take them to the meeting point with the official ambulance and court officers. Mark would stay at the house with Margaret, coordinating everything by phone. When they were about to leave, Margaret held Emily's arm. "Take this," she said, giving her a small silver pendant. "It was your grandmother's. It gave me strength in the most difficult moments." Emily put the pendant around her neck, hiding it under her uniform. "I'll be back soon, Mum, with Nathan." The journey to the meeting point was tense. Liam drove in silence, occasionally checking the rearview mirror to ensure they weren't being followed. Emily mentally repeated each step of the plan, each contingency. When they arrived, the ambulance and the official car were already waiting. "Remember," instructed Liam as they prepared, "the objective is just to safely transfer Nathan. No confrontations, no accusations. That will come later with the formal process." Emily nodded, trying to control her accelerated breathing. She took her place in the ambulance alongside two genuine paramedics who had been informed of the situation. The convoy began the final journey to Windcrest Manor. The imposing gates that had so intimidated Emily weeks ago appeared around the road curve. The court officers identified themselves through the intercom, presenting the court order. After a few minutes of tense waiting, the gates opened. In the mansion's courtyard, Heather waited with an impassive expression, flanked by Dr. Matthews and two men Emily had never seen, probably lawyers. When the officers presented the order, Heather examined the document meticulously. "This is absurd," she finally declared. "Based on false allegations from a mentally unstable employee who kidnapped a patient from Horizon Clinic." "The order is valid, Dr. Montgomery," replied the officer calmly. "Cooperate or you'll be detained for contempt." After a long moment of tension, Heather yielded with a stiff nod. "Dr. Matthews, please prepare the patient for transfer." Emily remained in the back of the ambulance, face partially covered by a surgical mask, avoiding eye contact. Her heart almost stopped when Heather looked in her direction, but the lawyer showed no recognition. 20 minutes later, Nathan was brought on a stretcher, connected to portable monitors and IV bags. Emily contained her emotion seeing him again. He seemed paler, more fragile than when she'd left him. Dr. Matthews handed a medical dossier to the head paramedic. "These are his current medications. Any alteration may cause severe reactions. I insist you maintain exactly this protocol." Emily discreetly examined the medication bags while helping accommodate Nathan in the ambulance. Something was wrong. The concentration of sedatives was much higher than normal. If that protocol were followed at the hospital, Nathan would probably never wake up. The ambulance departed, followed by the officer's car. Emily waited until they were outside the gates to alert the paramedics about the medication. Immediately, they began adjusting the dosages, following Emily's guidance. They were halfway to the hospital when Nathan began showing signs of instability. His pressure dropped dramatically. Oxygenation decreased. "Something's wrong," exclaimed one of the paramedics, checking vital signs. "He shouldn't react this way to gradual reduction." Emily quickly examined the medication bags, panic growing. "This isn't just sedative. There's something else here." Her mind worked frantically, recalling what Liam had discovered. Nathan was being slowly poisoned, and now, realizing they would lose control over him, Heather had accelerated the process. "We're losing him," shouted the paramedic when the cardiac monitor began emitting alarms. The ambulance accelerated toward the nearest hospital, no longer the originally planned one. Emily held Nathan's hand, begging him to resist, while the paramedics struggled to stabilize him. The next hours were a blur of hospital corridors, urgent medical terms, doctors and nurses running. Emily was taken to a waiting room while Nathan was taken for emergency treatment. Liam arrived moments later, pale with concern. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside Emily. "Poisoning," she replied, her voice trembling. Heather didn't just want to keep him sedated. When she realized she would lose control over him, she decided to eliminate him completely. The hours dragged on. A doctor finally appeared, his face grave. "We've managed to stabilize him, but his condition is critical. The poison affected his liver and kidneys. We need to identify the exact substance to administer the correct antidote." "And if we can't identify it in time?" asked Liam. The doctor hesitated. "Then a liver transplant will be necessary, immediately." Emily felt the world crumble. Even having managed to rescue Nathan from the mansion, he now faced an even more serious threat. And worse, thanks to the rushed judicial transfer, Heather and Caroline were still legally responsible for medical decisions regarding Nathan. "They'll never approve a transplant," whispered Emily to Liam when the doctor left. "Not when they were so close to getting what they wanted." The tears finally came, uncontrollable, All the effort, all the sacrifice, the escape from the clinic, the planned rescue, everything seemed in vain. Nathan was dying before her eyes, and she was powerless to prevent it. In the corridor, they heard raised voices. Heather had arrived at the hospital, accompanied by lawyers, demanding that Nathan be returned to Dr. Matthews's care. "They're going to take him back," whispered Emily, desperate. "And this time they'll make sure no one interferes again." Liam held her hands. "I won't allow it. Mark is on his way with a new court order based on the clear poisoning attempt." But Emily barely heard him. The emotional and physical exhaustion of the past days finally took its toll. She felt herself sinking into an abyss of despair. She had risked everything, her freedom, her safety, even her mother's fragile recovery, to save Nathan. And now, at the crucial moment, it seemed everything had been in vain. Maybe we should give up," she murmured, the words coming out before she could contain them. "Take my mother far away, start over somewhere else. Heather is too powerful. We'll never defeat her." "Emily," Liam held her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him. "This is not the time to give up. Nathan is alive thanks to you. Your mother is free thanks to you. We're closer than ever to exposing the whole truth." But the words sounded distant. In the corridor, Heather's voice grew louder, more confident. The doctor seemed to be yielding to the legal arguments. Emily's world was crumbling again. At that moment of profound despair, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Mark. "Hold on, reinforcements on the way." Minutes later, the hospital doors opened. Mark entered, accompanied not only by a federal judge, but also by a figure Emily never expected to see. Amanda Rivera, Nathan's previous caregiver, who was supposedly institutionalized at Horizon Clinic. "Constance helped her escape," explained Mark quickly. "She'll testify about everything she suffered at the hands of Heather and Caroline." Amanda approached Emily, her eyes reflecting a familiar pain. "You're stronger than I was," she said softly. "I couldn't endure what you endured, but now I'm here to help." Emily felt a spark of hope reignite in her chest. She wasn't alone in this fight. She never had been. The legal battle that followed in the hospital corridors was intense. The judge, confronted with Amanda's testimonies and evidence of poisoning, issued a preventive arrest warrant against Heather. Police officers accompanying, the judge took her away, furiously protesting about conspiracies and defamation. But the victory was bitter. Nathan remained in critical condition, urgently needing a transplant that might not arrive in time. Emily sat beside his bed in the ICU, holding his inert hand. "Don't you dare give up now," she whispered. "Not after everything we've been through." The night advanced, bringing with it Emily's darkest hour, the moment when hope, even newly rekindled, threatened to extinguish completely in the face of harsh medical reality. Dawn brought a change in Nathan's condition, not an improvement, but a precarious stabilization that doctors called a critical plateau, a tenuous balance between life and death. Emily hadn't left his side for a single moment, even when nurses insisted she rest. Exhaustion marked her face, but in her eyes shone a renewed determination. The sunrise found her still holding Nathan's hand, whispering promises and memories, as if her words could anchor him to life. It was at this moment that Mark silently entered the room, signaling for Emily to join him in the corridor. "I have news," he said, his low voice reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Heather's preventive detention has been maintained, but Caroline Blackwood remains free, and more worrying, she has initiated the process to reassume legal control over Nathan as his only living relative. But she's part of the conspiracy. How can she claim to care for him?" Without concrete evidence against her specifically, the judicial system treats the case as a family dispute. "We need something more to directly link her to Heather's actions." Emily ran her hands over her face, trying to organize her thoughts. "The journal. I need to go back to the mansion to recover Nathan's journal. He explicitly mentions Caroline, his suspicions about the poisoning. It's too risky. The mansion is closed, guarded. Caroline has certainly removed any compromising evidence." "Then we need another angle." Emily closed her eyes, mentally reviewing everything she had discovered in recent weeks. Suddenly, her eyes opened. The other victims. Amanda wasn't the only one, nor was my mother. There was an entire list in the mansion's archive. If we can find them. Emily's mind was working frantically now, as if all the puzzle pieces were finally starting to fit together. And the doctor, Dr. Matthews. He must have records, perhaps insurance against Heather and Caroline in case something went wrong. No one participates in a scheme like this without personal guarantee. Mark nodded slowly. We can pressure Dr. Matthews. With Heather arrested, he's vulnerable. Maybe offer partial immunity in exchange for cooperation. The plan began to take shape. Mark would activate his contacts in the judiciary to pressure Dr. Matthews, while Liam, who had left to pick up Margaret, would work with Amanda to locate other victims of the scheme. Emily would remain at the hospital, not only to care for Nathan, but also because a new thought had emerged, a possibility so bold she barely dared articulate it. When the doctor responsible for Nathan's case made his morning rounds, Emily asked for a moment alone with him. Doctor, about the transplant and what compatibility is needed. Ideally a close relative. Siblings have a high probability of compatibility. Parents and children have reasonable chances, but without available family, we depend on the national donation system, and time is against us. Emily took a deep breath. What if I were compatible? The doctor frowned. You're not related to the patient. No, but Emily hesitated. The idea that had emerged in her mind during the night was almost absurd, but not impossible. I'd like to be tested anyway. Please. Perhaps it was the intensity in her eyes, or simply the desperation of the situation, but the doctor agreed. A blood sample was collected, and Emily returned to Nathan's room with a renewed thread of hope. Mid-morning, Liam returned with Margaret. The reunion between mother and daughter was brief, but emotional. Margaret seemed stronger, more present, as if freedom and purpose were gradually restoring her essence. I got what you asked for, said Liam, handing Emily an envelope. Inside were Margaret's original identity documents, which Mark had recovered through contacts. Among them, Emily's birth certificate, a document she had never seen before. Her eyes scanned the paper, stopping at the father field. It wasn't Stanley Miller's name, as she had always believed, but another name that made her heart jump. Richard Blackwood. So it's true, whispered Emily, looking at her mother with new eyes. Margaret nodded sadly. Richard was Nathan's father. We were close during the time I worked at the mansion. When I discovered I was pregnant, he promised he would take care of us, that he would leave his wife. But then Caroline found out, completed Emily, the pieces fitting together, and you became a threat to her. Yes, I fled before they could silence me. I returned to Oakridge to Stanley, who was my boyfriend before I went to work at the mansion. He agreed to take me in, raise you as his daughter, in exchange for money that Richard secretly sent. Until the money ran out, and with it, my father's, Stanley's patience. The bitterness in Emily's voice was palpable. And when Caroline needed someone to care for Nathan, he saw the perfect opportunity to get rid of me. Liam, who had listened to the conversation in silence, finally spoke. This means you and Nathan are half-siblings, confirmed Emily, the reality still reverberating in her mind. That's why I felt so connected to him from the beginning. Some part of me recognized the bond, even without knowing. A nurse entered hurriedly, interrupting the conversation. Miss Miller, the doctor needs to speak with you immediately. In the office, the doctor was waiting with an expression Emily couldn't decipher. The preliminary compatibility results have arrived, he said. It's surprising, but you show close relative compatibility with the patient. How is this possible? Emily briefly explained the situation, presenting the birth certificate as proof. The doctor listened attentively, pondering the implications. This significantly changes the scenario. As a half-sister, you could legally donate part of your liver to Nathan, but I need to warn you, it's a complex procedure with substantial risks for both of you. What are the chances of success? With your compatibility, approximately 75%, but Nathan's debilitated state complicates everything, and you would undergo extensive surgery with weeks of recovery. Emily didn't hesitate. When can we do this? While Emily underwent preparatory tests for the possible donation, the legal battle intensified. Mark returned with disturbing news. Caroline had obtained an injunction to assume all medical decisions regarding Nathan, including approval of any procedures. She'll arrive in 2 hours with the court order, explained Mark. And she's already indicated she'll deny authorization for the transplant. Why? He'll die without the procedure, exclaimed Emily. Exactly. With Nathan dead and being the only recognized legal heir, she assumes complete control of the fortune. And with Heather taking all the blame for previous operations, Caroline comes out unscathed and rich. Despair threatened to consume Emily again, but this time it was quickly replaced by determined fury. They hadn't come so far, sacrificed so much, to lose now. How much time do we have before she arrives? 2 hours, maybe less. And how long would the judge who issued the arrest warrant against Heather take to get here? Mark immediately understood where Emily was going. I can contact him right now. If we present the new evidence about your relationship with Nathan and Caroline's intentions, do it. And Liam, find Amanda. We need her testimony about Caroline. While Mark made urgent calls, Liam left in search of Amanda. Emily returned to Nathan's side, holding his hand with renewed purpose. You're not going to die today, brother, she whispered. I won't allow it. The following hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. The doctor in charge, now aware of the complete situation, agreed to delay any decision until the legal dispute was resolved. Amanda arrived with Liam, bringing with her personal diaries she had kept hidden during her captivity at Horizon Clinic, documents that explicitly mentioned Caroline's instructions for administering harmful substances to Nathan. Margaret, in a moment of extraordinary clarity, recalled conversations she had witnessed years ago, when Caroline discussed with Heather the possibility of accelerating the departure of Richard Blackwood if he discovered the romance with Margaret. The final pieces of the puzzle fit together. It wasn't just Nathan who had been gradually poisoned, but also his father years before. What everyone had believed to be an aggressive cancer that claimed Richard was probably the result of the same scheme now used against his son. The judge, contacted urgently by Mark, agreed to immediately re-examine the case, given the gravity of the situation. A virtual hearing was scheduled for 40 minutes later, 20 minutes before Caroline's expected arrival at the hospital. Emily, exhausted but unwavering, prepared for the final confrontation. The evidence was organized, the witnesses ready. Her mother, Amanda, the medical records, her own birth certificate, each element a nail in the coffin of the conspiracy that had almost destroyed so many lives. Are you ready? Asked Mark as they waited for the connection with the judge. Emily looked at Nathan, unconscious but fighting, at her mother, finally free after 15 years of captivity, at Amanda, determined to obtain justice, at Liam and Mark, who had risked everything to help. More than ever, she replied. The laptop screen lit up, showing the judge's serious face. At the same moment, they heard altered voices in the corridor. Caroline had arrived earlier than expected, demanding to see Nathan immediately. Quick, whispered Mark. She can't interrupt the hearing once started. The judge initiated the formal procedure while the voices in the corridor approached. The door to Nathan's room opened abruptly, revealing Caroline Blackwood, elegant, composed, and absolutely furious to realize what was happening. This is a judicial affront, she exclaimed, advancing to interrupt the video conference. Liam and a hospital security guard blocked her path. Mrs. Blackwood, the judge's voice emanated from the laptop speakers. Your presence is timely. We're re-examining your nephew's case in light of substantial new evidence. Please join us. Caroline's face paled when she noticed Margaret among those present. Her eyes moved quickly to Emily, and for the first time she seemed to notice the resemblance between her and Nathan, the same eyes, the same determined chin. This is an absurd conspiracy, began Caroline, regaining her composure. These people are manipulating the situation to save my brother's life, interrupted Emily, her voice firm. Your nephew, Richard Blackwood's legitimate son, just like me. The shock on Caroline's face was undeniable. The final confrontation that would define Nathan's fate and the future of all involved was about to begin. The virtual hearing proceeded with dramatic intensity. Emily, supported by Mark, methodically presented the accumulated evidence. Margaret, in a moving testimony, related her relationship with Richard Blackwood, the pregnancy discovered by Caroline, the forced flight, and the years of captivity at Horizon Clinic. Amanda described in disturbing detail the treatment she had witnessed being administered to Nathan, the conversations between Caroline and Heather about accelerating the process when convenient. Each revelation hit Caroline like a physical blow. Her elegant composure began to crumble, replaced by growing fury. "This is absurd," she protested when the judge asked about her response to the accusations. "Richard would never acknowledge an illegitimate child. This woman was just one of many employees he was involved with. There's no concrete proof of parentage." It was at this moment that Liam presented the complete result of the compatibility tests between Emily and Nathan, a compatibility that could only exist between siblings. "And regarding the poisoning," continued the judge, "how do you explain the toxicological reports indicating the presence of non-prescribed substances in the patient's body?" "Dr. Matthews was responsible for the medication," Caroline defended herself. "Heather supervised everything. I just occasionally visited my nephew." Mark smiled for the first time since the beginning of the hearing. "Your Honor, I'd like to present our final witness." The screen split, revealing the haggard face of Dr. Matthews, accompanied by a justice officer. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence against Heather and fearing being the only one to bear the consequences, the doctor had agreed to collaborate, in exchange for a reduced sentence. Dr. Caroline Blackwood was not only aware of the plan, he testified, his voice trembling with nervousness, but was the principal architect. It was she who first suggested using substances that would gradually deteriorate Nathan's health without raising suspicions. The same substances, he hesitated, looking directly at Margaret, that were used in Richard Blackwood's treatment years before. A heavy silence took over the room. Caroline, realizing she was cornered, tried one last exit. "This is a conspiracy orchestrated by a mentally unstable young woman and her unbalanced mother, aided by a fifth-rate lawyer and a corrupt doctor trying to save his own skin." The judge, who had followed the entire presentation with impartial attention, finally spoke. "The evidence presented is substantial and disturbing. Considering the gravity of the situation and the imminent risk to patient Nathan Blackwood's life, I immediately revoke the injunction granted to Mrs. Caroline Blackwood. Furthermore, I determine the preventive detention of the accused for attempted murder, criminal association, and obstruction of justice." The hospital security guards, who had been instructed to await the decision, approached Caroline. With a scream of fury, she tried to lunge at Emily, being restrained before she could reach her. "You think you've won?" she hissed as she was escorted out. "This isn't over. I have resources, connections you can't even imagine." Emily didn't respond. Her focus was already on Nathan and what needed to be done to save him. With judicial authorization secured, the transplant procedure was scheduled for the following morning. Emily spent the night by her brother's side, holding his hand, telling him everything she had discovered, promising they would soon be truly together, building the family that had been denied them. The surgery lasted 8 hours. When Emily woke from anesthesia, she found her mother beside the bed, holding her hand as she had done so many times in her distant childhood. "Everything went well, sweetheart," whispered Margaret, tears of joy shining in her eyes. "Nathan is responding well. The doctors are optimistic." The following weeks were of gradual recovery for both. Each day, Nathan showed stronger signs of improvement. When he finally managed to speak without help, his first words were for Emily. "Thank you for not giving up on me, sister." The legal process against Heather and Caroline advanced steadily. The investigations revealed an even broader scheme than they had initially imagined. Other wealthy families had been victims of similar tactics. Inconvenient relatives silenced in psychiatric clinics, while fortunes were drained by corrupt administrators. 3 months after the surgery, Emily and Nathan were sufficiently recovered to return to Windcrest Manor, no longer as prisoners but as legitimate owners. Accompanied by Margaret, Mark, Liam and Amanda, they crossed the gates that had previously symbolized oppression. "What will we do with this place?" asked Nathan, observing the imposing structure that had been his prison for so long. Emily contemplated the mansion, then looked at her mother, at Amanda, at all the lives that had been broken within those walls. "Transform it," she replied simply. "This place has held pain for too long. It's time to make it shelter healing." 6 months later, Windcrest Manor was reborn as the New Beginnings Foundation, a support and rehabilitation center for survivors of psychological and institutional abuse. The rooms that once imprisoned now welcomed. The corridors, once monitored by cameras, now witnessed the recovery process of dozens of people. Emily and Nathan worked side by side in the foundation's administration. Margaret, gradually recovering, her inner strength, coordinated a special program for women who had lost years of their lives in institutions similar to Horizon Clinic. Amanda became the foundation's spokesperson, taking her story public for awareness. Liam, who initially planned to return to his medical career after the case, decided to remain as the foundation's clinical director. His bond with the Miller Blackwood family had become deeper than he could have predicted, especially his relationship with Emily, which was evolving from mutual admiration to something more significant. On a golden autumn afternoon, Emily found herself in the mansion's garden, now replanted with colorful flowers and therapeutic plants. Nathan approached, leaning slightly on a cane, a reminder of the battles they had faced. "The judge just confirmed," he announced. "Heather and Caroline's sentence has been upheld, 30 years without the right to parole." Emily nodded, feeling not vengeance but a profound sense of justice. "And the other victims? We're locating more each week. 3 were transferred from Horizon Clinic to our program yesterday." Emily smiled, observing the foundation's movement around them. Therapists, patients, volunteers, all participating in the collective healing process. "You know what's strange?" she reflected. "If none of this had happened, if our mother hadn't been silenced, if you hadn't been poisoned, if I hadn't been sold to this house, maybe we would never have found each other, never known about each other." Nathan held his sister's hand. "I think somehow we were destined to meet. Not even Caroline and Heather's worst intentions could prevent that." From across the garden, Margaret waved to her children. Beside her, one of the new patients was taking her first hesitant steps outside her comfort zone, supported by a therapist. "New beginnings," murmured Emily. "For all of us." Nathan smiled, gently squeezing his sister's hand. "And this is just the beginning." Together they walked toward their mother, leaving behind the shadows of the past and advancing toward the light of a future that, against all odds, they had earned the right to build. Dear listeners, we hope Emily's story has deeply moved you. This journey of overcoming, family reunion and justice reminds us of the power of human resilience, even in the darkest moments. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories of people who, like Emily and Nathan, transformed adversity into purpose. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you were touched by this redemption narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of family relationships, the pursuit of justice and the power of true love.